This is about the spot that the bust was actually found. It's one version of Nefertiti's official portrait. She may herself have signed off on this image. But really, we have no idea what she looked like in real life.
A deep wound on an ancient mummy's jaw may hold the brutal truth about how Egypt's most famous queen met her end. Yet her death was never publicly recorded. Why would a civilization that worshipped eternal life erase one of its most powerful women from history? Nefertiti vanished suddenly after years of reigning beside Pharaoh Akhenaten, leaving behind no confirmed tomb and no clear cause of death.
The world-famous bust of Nefertiti, Queen of Egypt, first went on display in the German capital 100 years ago. That might sound like ancient history, but her beauty spent more than 3,000 years.
What happened to the queen who once ruled like a king? And why did Egypt's ruling class try so hard to wipe her memory away? The missing queen mystery. There is a deep and unsettling mystery at the heart of ancient Egypt that has confounded historians for over a century. The disappearance of Nefertiti's body and the complete lack of record about how she died. Nefertiti was not just any queen. She was the great royal wife of Pharaoh Akhenaten, one of Egypt's most revolutionary rulers. She appeared prominently in temple reliefs, sometimes more often than the pharaoh himself, wearing crowns and wielding symbols of power typically reserved for kings. Yet, after roughly 12 years into her husband's reign, all traces of her vanish. No tomb, no burial inscription, no death announcement, just silence. This silence is baffling because, in Egyptian culture, great effort was always made to ensure the dead, especially royalty, could live forever through their names and monuments. Erasing a name meant erasing the person's existence, both physically and spiritually. So why would a queen who ruled so visibly and with such authority be denied the elaborate burial expected of her? The expected treasure-laden tomb and detailed inscriptions that would protect her memory for eternity have never been found or documented. The absence of any confident identification of her burial or remains sharpens the intrigue. Unlike other kings and queens whose funerary objects and resting places provide clues, Nefertiti's final resting place remains a blank page. Over time, theories have abounded. She may have died, been buried in secret, or even fled, but none fully explain this glaring historical black hole. It raises uncomfortable questions about ancient power struggles and historical manipulation, and then there's the mystery that sort of sits there, quietly, like it knows more than it should. In Cairo, a battered mummy is displayed in a glass case, a woman people call the Younger Lady. Even though the burial setting and a few artifacts suggest she was royal, her real identity has never been nailed down with certainty. She has a nasty jaw injury and a broken arm, but there's no clear name, no title attached to her. Some folks think she might be Nefertiti in disguise, a hidden form, maybe. Others insist she is a separate, forgotten royal woman, someone else entirely. Either way, the uncertainty just piles onto the bigger mystery of the missing queen. The official tale about Nefertiti's death feels thin, really thin. The records sketch out how she rose and ruled, and then, without warning, everything stops. No explanation, no neat ending, just a sudden cut in the storyline. Egypt was famous for monuments and for careful chronicling, so this kind of disappearance doesn't read as accidental. It looks more like a deliberate quiet, and that quiet suggests a chapter that is darker than a simple natural death. There's also that uncomfortable reality that Egypt's religious and political world was being rearranged hard during this time. Akhenaten's push for one god, the Aten, didn't land gently. It unsettled major religious groups that had power and tradition on their side. Nefertiti, as his influential queen, was right in the middle of that seismic shift. So maybe her vanishing act wasn't random at all. Maybe it connects to the backlash, the pushback, the revolt against the religious overhaul. In the end, the puzzle of her death and missing burial isn't only an academic tease. It links to something bigger, a true upheaval in Egyptian society. Her disappearance makes you keep asking what really happened, not just to one queen, but to the way history is written, rewritten, and sometimes intentionally scrubbed away. This missing queen she becomes a kind of symbol too, of authority, resistance, and erasure, a mystery that refuses to go away. This sets the stage for exploring how Nefertiti rose to such unprecedented power, and how that power may well be connected to her enigmatic disappearance and presumed death. Nefertiti's ascent to power was extraordinary, transforming her from royal consort to a figure who may have ruled as pharaoh in her own right. Nefertiti's rise to power. Nefertiti, whose name means "the beautiful one has come," was far more than a ceremonial queen. During the early years of Akhenaten's reign, she appeared almost everywhere the pharaoh appeared, signaling her importance in the royal court and religious revolution. Her image adorns temples, clutches symbols of power, and holds a position once unimaginable for a woman in ancient Egypt. In some reliefs, she even wears the flat-topped crown traditionally reserved for kings, asserting authority in ways no queen had before. Egypt, a civilization enduring for thousands of years, counted only a handful of female rulers like Hatshepsut or Sobek Neferu. Nefertiti pushed the boundaries beyond precedent, challenging centuries of gender norms and religious traditions. Some scholars argue that for a time she may have ruled alongside Akhenaten as his co-regent or even independently, wielding power symbolic of a pharaoh herself. Her role was intimately tied to the dramatic religious changes sweeping through Egypt. Akhenaten declared that the god Aten, the solar disk, was the sole deity worthy of worship, abolishing Egypt's complex pantheon and directly challenging the powerful priesthood of Amun. Nefertiti stood with him at the center of this theological revolution, not as a bystander, but as an active participant. Together, they uprooted old gods and traditions, establishing a new capital at Amarna to distance the throne from traditional religious centers. This religious insurgency earned them a bunch of powerful enemies, really. Notably, the wealthy priesthood whose influence and wealth were decimated overnight. Opposition to their rule simmered hard, creating a volatile atmosphere where power was always contested, like it couldn't stay put for even a minute. Nefertiti's unprecedented visibility made her a target, but also marked her as a kind of force that could shape Egypt's destiny, for better or worse. The couple's efforts to rewrite the spiritual landscape were undeniably political. Nefertiti's iconography, with weapons and smiting poses, communicated her role not just as queen, but as protector and warrior, sort of channeling divine authority right alongside her husband. That fusion of religious innovation and political control defined their reign, and it lifted Nefertiti beyond the traditional queenly sphere, almost like she was more than a title. This potent combination of radical religion and female empowerment paved the way for that mysterious figure who appeared as a female pharaoh under the name Nefertiti shortly after Nefertiti's disappearance. The overlap between the two raises questions about whether Nefertiti simply vanished or transformed her identity to seize even greater power, quietly and with intent. Still, this rise and transformation happened while Egypt was hit by one calamity after another, shaking the realm profoundly, including devastating plagues that swept through the land and even the palace itself. Those events set the stage for the royal family's rapid and tragic losses. As Egypt grappled with religious upheaval, a devastating epidemic ravaged the royal household and the kingdom itself: the plague and royal deaths. Amidst the chaos of religious transformation, Egypt was struck by a severe plague that compounded the instability of Akhenaten's reign. Diplomatic correspondence of the era refers to a sickness spreading through the region, likely linked to the Hittite plague, which swept across the ancient Near East around this time. This pestilence reached Egypt's new royal city rapidly, bringing sickness and death to many at court. A remarkable succession of deaths among the royal family followed swiftly. Daughters, other wives, and key figures close to the throne disappear from the record within a tight time frame. Such rapid attrition must have sent shockwaves through the palace and the country, threatening the very continuity of the dynasty. The official narrative that Nefertiti died quietly from disease fits this grim context, but leaves many questions unaddressed. If Nefertiti perished from the plague, as some scholars suggest, it would seem logical that she received a grand royal burial consistent with her status. Yet no evidence exists of such an interment. The missing tomb and absence of her preserved remains remain striking anomalies. Plague victims, especially of royal blood, did not go unburied or unhonored in Egypt's elaborate mortuary culture. This discrepancy raises suspicion that something more was at play than natural death alone. The coincidence of the plague and Nefertiti's erasure from record lends itself to theories of political intrigue, forced disappearance, or worse. A peaceful epidemic death does not explain the deliberate suppression of her memory. It suggests the need to look beyond biological causes to political motives. Underlying these deaths is the broader context of a kingdom in turmoil. Religious upheaval, combined with political enemies biding their time, created a lethal environment. The priesthood of Amun, robbed of power and wealth, angrily watched the royal family weaken. Some have speculated they may have played a role in attempts to remove or silence certain figures. At the same time, the sudden appearance of a female pharaoh bearing a name linked to Nefertiti raises the possibility that her erasure was not from death alone, but from a forced transformation in identity and rule. The plague may explain some deaths, but cannot fully explain the shadowy disappearance of Egypt's most famous queen. As the threat of death spread and political power shifted, the royal family's once secure grip began to unravel. It was in this dangerous void that the mysterious female ruler Nefertiti would soon emerge, signaling a new, enigmatic chapter in the story. The kingdom was collapsing under invisible and visible blows, and the stage was set for a ruler to reappear in a form no one expected. The female pharaoh, Nefertiti. As the royal family faced decline, an enigmatic figure rose from the shadows. Nefertiti, a female pharaoh appearing suddenly at the peak of Egyptian power. What makes this so remarkable is that her name surfaces just as Nefertiti's disappears from all records, effectively filling the void left by the vanished queen. The intricate feminine grammar and royal titles of Nefertiti leave little doubt that this was a woman ruling as pharaoh, a position scarcely held by females in Egypt's long history. For years, scholars kept these two figures, Nefertiti and Nefertiti, apart in their minds. One, a queen who vanished; the other, a mysterious female king who emerged. But the timelines align too precisely to ignore. The idea that Nefertiti shed her previous identity and assumed a new royal persona gains traction when considering that Nefertiti's name was part of Nefertiti's own royal titulary earlier in life. She wasn't borrowing it, she was reclaiming it, marking a transformation rather than a replacement. This possible transformation hints at a woman who was not content to disappear quietly but chose to rewrite her fate, ruling either alongside a dying Akhenaten or by herself after his death. The theory radically changes how we see Nefertiti's final years, not a silent death, but a bold reinvention. Egypt's most famous queen might have become one of its rare female pharaohs, wielding sovereign power under a different name. There is further evidence hinting at this elevated status. Akhenaten's own sarcophagus features protective figures traditionally represented by goddesses Isis and Nephthys. Instead, 4 carved guardians resemble Nefertiti, placing her in a divine role guarding the pharaoh for eternity. This is not the tribute of a discarded wife, but the honor of a divine partner, signaling her exceptional position at the end of her life. This treatment kind of contradicts the idea that she simply fell out of favor or got forgotten. Whatever her fate was, it seems pretty far from marginal. Being a female pharaoh, or co-regent with that kind of authority, would naturally make enemies, and that political danger may be the reason why her name was later scrubbed from monuments and history. Her vanishing from the record then looks less like a plain accident and more like a deliberate erasure. With that in mind, the whole version of Nefertiti as a victim of plague or some natural passing starts to feel like it doesn't fully fit. Instead, it points toward a woman who insisted on the highest royal mandate and so pulled in dangerous opposition. When her name is removed from stone walls and from official lists, it begins to look like a calculated strike against her memory, not just some bureaucratic fuss. Also, the image of a queen basically turning herself into a king disrupts a lot of assumptions about ancient Egypt's gender roles and how power was handled. It makes historians reconsider how royalty, religion, and political control actually tangled together, especially during the Amarna period. Nefertiti might have been the most audacious person in Egyptian history, who defied expectations both in life and after death. Still, though, even with this persuasive picture, the question doesn't really go away. Where is her body? To reconcile this story with the physical evidence, we have to look toward the mysterious younger lady, a royal mummy with violent injuries and an identity that's not fully certain. And maybe that is where the key hides to what Egypt tried hardest to hide. Hidden behind a veil of mystery lies the battered body known as the Younger Lady, a mummy whose story intertwines hauntingly with Nefertiti's legend. The Younger Lady mummy, discovered in 1898 by archaeologist Victor Loret in tomb K535 in the Valley of the Kings, the Younger Lady is a nameless female mummy that has puzzled Egyptologists for over a century. She was found in a sealed side chamber alongside two other mummies, stripped and unwrapped, apparently abandoned as unwanted relics. Despite the rough conditions, she was clearly a person of royal status, mummified with care before being desecrated, an unsettling juxtaposition of honor and neglect. One of the most striking features is her shaved head, which initially misled some to believe she was male. An anatomist's closer inspection confirmed her female sex, but the question of identity remained elusive. Adding to the enigma, she bears severe injuries, a deep, possibly fatal wound on the left side of her jaw, a broken arm folded across her chest, and trauma to her rib cage far exceeding damage typical of tomb robbers' violence. For years, experts dismissed the injuries as post-mortem damage caused by looters, but later forensic studies revealed the jaw wound was inflicted ante-mortem, likely a fatal blow sustained while she was alive. The arrangement of her body, one arm across her chest, the other down her side, corresponds to a royal burial pose, suggesting deliberate positioning before whatever desecration occurred. This evidence paints a grim picture of a high-status royal woman who suffered violent death, was stripped of her identity, and then deliberately erased. No name ever accompanied her remains, a powerful act in Egyptian culture equating to soul obliteration. Her erasure went beyond death. It aimed to annihilate her memory for eternity. Speculation about the Younger Lady's identity really kinda blew up in 2003, when the British Egyptologist Joanne Fletcher put forward the idea that she was, in fact, Nefertiti. Fletcher pointed to a handful of clues: the style of wig fragments recovered with the mummy, a very distinctive double ear piercing linked with Egyptian royalty, and the royal band impressions on her head. Put all together, plus the timing of the discovery and her injuries, the case felt pretty strong to many people. Then, the whole thing kinda took a different direction once DNA analysis became more advanced. The tests indicated that the Younger Lady was Tutankhamun's mother, and also that she was the sibling of Akhenaten. So yes, it still suggests royal bloodline, but it also puts a serious dent in the claim that she was Nefertiti. This matters because Nefertiti is never referred to as a king's daughter, a wording that would be hard to leave out if she had been a princess by birth. Instead, it seems the Younger Lady was another royal woman entirely, which honestly adds more layers rather than giving clean answers. Despite this, the DNA results are not airtight. The royal family in Akhenaten's era was highly intermarried, with tangled relationship patterns that make genetic readings kind of tricky. Scholars still go back and forth on whether the Younger Lady's standing as a full sister of Akhenaten could be understood differently. Some people keep holding out hope that the real identity of both the Younger Lady and Nefertiti's fate stays open, even now. What is undeniable, however, is the violent nature of her death and the deliberate attempts to scrub her presence from history. Whether or not she was Nefertiti, the Younger Lady's existence points to the brutal reality that sat underneath the polished facade of royal power in Egypt's most turbulent religious and political shift. Her story is, honestly, a haunting chapter within the broader Amarna period tale, a time when death, betrayal, and erasure were treated like weapons in the deadly contest for the throne. If royal identity was so carefully erased in death, it leaves us to wonder what the political forces behind such violence hoped to protect or erase forever. DNA evidence and controversy. In 2010, A groundbreaking DNA study sought to unravel the mystery of the younger lady's identity and her connection to Egypt's royal family. Led by the Egyptian authorities and involving international experts, the genetic analysis revealed that the younger lady was the biological mother of the famous boy king Tutankhamun, and also the full sister of the man buried in tomb Kfiv 55, widely believed to be Akhenaten. This information suggested she was a daughter of Pharaoh Amenhotep III and Queen Tiye, placing her firmly within the core royal lineage of the time. However, this revelation complicated the picture rather than simplifying it. Nefertiti's name is never accompanied by the title King's Daughter in any inscriptions, something that would be considered essential if she were indeed the daughter of a pharaoh. This absence makes it unlikely that Nefertiti and the younger lady are the same person, contradicting earlier theories that identified the battered mummy as the famous queen. Instead, the younger lady appears to be another high-ranking royal woman, possibly Akhenaten's sister and wife. Yet, the DNA evidence itself is not beyond dispute. The Amarna dynasty's family tree was deeply entangled with incestuous relationships. Brothers married sisters, and daughters married fathers, making genetic analysis complex and sometimes ambiguous. The dense overlap of genetic markers in such a tightly intermarried lineage poses challenges for definitive conclusions, and some experts caution against reading the genetic data too literally. And still, when you zoom in more, scholarly debates are suggesting that the younger lady's relationship to Akhenaten might not be totally straightforward. A full sibling connection. It could be a different generational tie, or maybe it's just a variation in how the genealogical lines are read and reconstructed in the first place. These alternate readings keep the door open, so the whole question doesn't get a clean closure, at least not yet, and discussion can continue without being neatly forced shut. Even so, despite the uncertainties, one point feels blunt and hard to deny. Whoever the younger lady was, she belonged to Egypt's most powerful family during a moment defined by political and religious upheaval. Her violent end, shown by the fatal facial wound and the later erasure of her identity, really speak volumes about how lethal the stakes could be inside the royal court. The DNA results, while helpful for certain family links, did not give the definitive answer many people hoped for. Instead, they muddle things further, and they highlight how tangled the bloodlines and power struggles were, the kind that basically defined the Amarna period. That ambiguity also feeds into a wider theme, a dynasty trying to hold on to control while facing fierce internal fractures and external pressures at the same time. In the end, the younger lady's identity stays partly shrouded in mystery, and it mirrors the bigger uncertainties around Nefertiti's fate and the turbulent end of Akhenaten's reign. Her story basically reminds us that even scientific breakthroughs can leave you with more questions, especially when history has been shaped through deliberate obfuscation and not just accident. And since identities were buried and then rewritten so carefully, the question shifts a bit from who she was to why her memory was suppressed in such a violent way. The removal of a queen's name and likeness ends up being the clearest clue, like a trail mark to the political fights that were fought long after death. What happened to the memory of Nefertiti after her life and possible death reveals the ruthless forces reshaping Egypt's history in the wake of Akhenaten's rule. The erasure of Nefertiti's memory. When Akhenaten died and the religious revolution he and Nefertiti had championed collapsed, the backlash was fierce and thorough. The powerful priests of Amun, who had been stripped of their temples, offerings, and political influence, reclaimed their position with a vengeance. The new ruling powers abandoned the city of Amarna and restored the old gods, reversing the radical changes that had shaken Egypt to its core. This restoration was accompanied by a systematic effort to remove Akhenaten and Nefertiti from official history. Their names were chiseled off monuments, their images defaced, and references to their reign were struck from king lists. Akhenaten was branded as a heretic or criminal, and Nefertiti was swept up in this historical cleansing, rendered almost invisible in Egyptian records. The missing tomb of Nefertiti takes on new significance in light of this political erasure. It is not just the absence of her resting place, but the likelihood of an active campaign to ensure it remains undiscovered. Erasing her from history meant erasing her grave, her name, and ultimately her chance for eternal life, according to Egyptian beliefs. This erasure was not the work of foreign invaders or random vandals. It was carried out by insiders, members of her own court and family who survived the revolution and later rebuilt the old order. One figure central to this reversal was Ai, a powerful court official closely linked to Akhenaten and believed by some scholars to have been Nefertiti's father. After Tutankhamun's premature death, Ai seized the throne, embodying the resurgence of traditional power. Those who orchestrated the historical deletion of Nefertiti knew exactly where she was buried and how to conceal her existence. This insider knowledge made the cover-up both precise and effective, turning her final resting place into a lost secret. The removal of her memory was an extension of the political struggle that defined her life, ensuring she would not haunt the New Egypt's narrative. This ruthless rewriting of history forces us to consider how much of the Amarna period's truth has been lost or deliberately hidden. The victors controlled the story, burying inconvenient facts beneath layers of stone and silence. Nefertiti's erasure highlights the fragility of historical memory when power shifts so dramatically. The obliteration of Nefertiti's presence stands as a tragic coda to a reign that challenged Egypt's most sacred traditions. It was not simply the downfall of a queen, but the symbolic undoing of an era and a vision for change. In that sense, her fate is inseparable from the broader story of religious and political restoration. This blanking out of names and images endures as a testament to the forces arrayed against her, a final act of control that sought to make her as extinct in memory as she may have been in life. Yet, the very gaps and silences left behind allow us to piece together a far more complicated and compelling story. Understanding this fierce erasure invites us to look beyond monuments and royal lists and into the shadowy corners where history was fought, lost, and sometimes reclaimed. Nefertiti's story remains one of the most extraordinary in human history, a queen who vanished from the world, only to live on as a mystery that refuses to die. The search for her tomb. The search for Nefertiti's final resting place remains one of the greatest mysteries in Egyptian archaeology. Interest surged when British Egyptologist Nicholas Reeves examined high-resolution laser scans of Tutankhamun's tomb. He noticed faint straight lines beneath the painted plaster, suggesting two sealed doorways hidden behind the north and west walls. If they were real, the famous tomb might contain undiscovered chambers. Reeves proposed a bold theory. He believed Tutankhamun's unusually small tomb had originally been built for a queen, possibly Nefertiti. According to his idea, Tutankhamun died unexpectedly and was buried in only part of the original structure, while Nefertiti's burial chamber remained sealed behind the walls. If true, one of history's greatest archaeological discoveries could be only a few feet away. In late 2015, radar scans appeared to support the theory. Egyptian officials announced they were about 90% confident that a space existed behind the painted walls. Archaeologists around the world were thrilled, believing they might be on the verge of finding a second intact royal burial in the Valley of the Kings. The excitement did not last. Later, radar surveys produced conflicting results, and then a more advanced investigation in 2018 used multiple radar frequencies to knock out errors. Even so, the equipment managed to detect known underground chambers, but it also reported no hidden room behind Tutankhamun's burial chamber. Researchers then decided the original reading had been caused by ghost signals, false radar reflections that made it look like there was space. Even so, the mystery did not fully fade away. Another ground-penetrating radar survey outside the tomb picked up a corridor-like anomaly beneath the surrounding rock. It was not behind the painted walls, but it still suggested that unexplored spaces could exist nearby. Reeves has kept defending his theory and searching for new evidence. Despite those curious clues, archaeologists probably will not dig much further. Tutankhamun's tomb is one of Egypt's most valuable historical treasures, and any invasive work could lead to irreversible damage. The risk, frankly, outweighs the chance of finding yet another chamber. So, the mystery stays. A queen who vanished from history, a possible hidden pharaoh, a nameless mummy with injuries that still make no clear sense, and a tomb that has never been found. Whether Nefertiti's resting place was deliberately concealed or just lost to time, her disappearance remains one of ancient Egypt's biggest unanswered questions. Nefertiti's story is one of power, mystery, and a cover-up that may never be fully unraveled. A queen who challenged gods and kings only to be erased from history's pages. If this tale has captured your imagination, be sure to like and subscribe for more deep dives into the secrets of our past. There's always more to uncover beneath the sands. And before you leave, watch the next video appearing on your screen, because the next ancient mystery may be even harder to explain.